What's up, everybody? I'm HoopsandHipHop, and welcome to yet another episode of the Pokeblock Podcast. Now, in this week's episode, we kind of had a topic just sprung on us out of nowhere, and I think you probably know what I'm talking about, because in Thursday's Pokemon Direct, we kind of got some information. It was announced that we are getting a Pokemon Sword and Shield expansion pass, 2 of them in fact, and there is a lot of just really amazing stuff in there, so we're going to be going over that just basically in a long form discussion, so to speak. I did kind of discuss my initial thoughts, impressions, that kind of stuff on my own YouTube channel yesterday, so if you've already checked that out, you probably kind of already know how I feel, but I'm going to be going into some more long form, extended kind of thoughts, and there's some other things I want to talk about as to why this is just basically the best thing that Game Freak could have ever done, and it bodes extremely well for Game Freak going forward, and so I'm just going to get into the nitty-gritty of that, and I am really looking forward to doing so, because I honestly just think Game Freak just absolutely blew it out of the water with this expansion pass. First, the idea that it's an expansion pass itself as opposed to a new game is awesome, because while it would be kind of nice to have, obviously, your traditional third game, like your Platinum, your Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon, your Emerald, etc., and it would be nice to kind of just have that in your hand, those games were already kind of DLC to begin with. They were DLC before DLC was DLC, just in a cartridge form. So they really, in terms of just offering it again at full price, was never really worth the price to begin with, to be honest. I definitely have bought them before, and I don't regret it, absolutely not, but they definitely don't really, those games have never really added enough to justify the full price again, so doing it this way, and the reason why we're comparing the two here is because Game Freak specifically said that this is going to be the replacement, at least this time around, and assuming going forward for those types of games, where we get an expansion instead, and this is honestly the best way to do it, because not only is the expansion half the price of what a new game would be at full price, $60, but this expansion, just even based on just what we've seen in the first trailer and reveal for it, is already adding more content than any third version has ever added, ever. Like, I don't even feel like remotely unconfident saying that. Like, that is just an absolute fact, because you've got Emerald, you've got Crystal, you've got Platinum, you've got Yellow. All those games added, basically it was a peppering of new content that those games added. Whereas Pokemon Sword and Shield, the expansion pass for Pokemon Sword and Shield is just kind of like screwing the top off of the pepper shaker and just dumping the whole thing all over the game. That's how much new content there is, and that's just a really good comparison. There's already so much more, and it's literally half the price of what you would be paying traditionally. So this is definitely a really good way to go. And then another really good thing about it is that they're adding 200 plus more Pokemon without even having to buy the expansion pass to get the Pokemon, because they're going to be added through the expansion, but they're also going to update Pokemon Sword and Shield as a whole, so you'll be able to get these Pokemon through transferring, through trading, and just other means, even if you don't have the expansion. So now, on top of all that extra brand new content, we've also got 200 more Pokemon that we're missing from the National Dex, so now it's like a 600 out of 900 sort of situation that we have in terms of available Pokemon, and that's a pretty good number. Like I said in my own video, that's 2/3 of the decks, and literally that makes the whole National Dex problem even less of a problem by like 200 out of 900. That's like 22% or something like that. So that's a significant like chunk that is just gone away. I mean, I don't really think the expansion will nearly solve every problem that Sword and Shield has, but I think once we get both expansion passes and we get both packs, and then we look at Sword and Shield as an entire game with the expansion pass and look at everything that's there, I think I don't think you'll be able to argue in any way, shape, or form that Sword and Shield is at least in the top, like at least not in the top 3. Like, I think after all is said and done, there's going to be really no discussion whatsoever that Pokemon Sword and Shield are at least in the top 3 of Pokemon games, if not higher, because I don't really see how you can beat what Sword and Shield offers as a base game plus what the expansion offers on top of that. And obviously the natural rebuttal to that is going to be, well, it should have been in the game from the beginning, yada, 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 yada. Well, you know what? I really don't think that is a good argument because, I mean, obviously that's going to come with any DLC discussion, but a lot of people are saying that Pokemon Sword and Shield is bare bones and there's nothing to do. And all I have to say to that is, if you think there's nothing to do in Pokemon Sword and Shield, then you probably haven't played a Pokemon game before, because there's absolutely a ton to do. First, there's the story, which is basically just, it's just as meaty and full of content, if you will, as any other Pokemon game in terms of just the main story and the plot. So there's that in and of itself. That's just, it's right on kind of pace with every other Pokemon game in that regard. But then you've also got catching all of the Pokemon. There's 400 Pokemon to catch. Even if it's not all of the Pokemon, you've still got 400 Pokemon to catch. Like, that's a lot. Like, that is going to take you some time just to do right there. You've also got the Curry Dex. You've got a number of side quests. There's just basically as much as any other Pokemon game in this game in terms of content. So the argument that it's bare bones is completely way off base. And if you are of the opinion that it's bare bones, then you're not really, you're expecting something different from Pokemon than what it's bringing forward, because this is kind of the same level of just stuff in the game that we've always seen from Pokemon. I mean, maybe it's less than like Heart Gold and Soul Silver that just had a whole second new region, but other than that, it pretty dang hits the standard. So I really don't think it's an issue of that, number one. And number two, as far as just like it should have been in the game from the beginning, well, you know what? It's fine if it's absolutely fine for developers if they want to add more to their game after finishing their game. And in that sense, it didn't need to be in the game initially, because the game already had enough to begin with, as we already said. So if they want to add more to the game, then they have a right to charge for the game, because guess what? All of the concept art that we saw in the trailer that they showed off as a way of showing off what's in the thing, well, that requires someone sitting at their desk for 8 hours a day at Game Freak, and not only brainstorming and developing the designs we saw, but then once they're finalized, also drawing them and putting all of this together. And we saw hundreds. I mean, we probably didn't see hundreds, but based on what we saw in the trailer, I think it's safe to say that there are literally hundreds of pieces of concept art just for this expansion. And then from there, you got to take it and you got to model it into the game. You got to rig it. You got to animate it. You got to make it all work. You got to program it. And guess what? That costs money. You can't just expect someone to do that for free. So absolutely, they are within their right to be able to charge for this. And once again, they're charging $30, which is half the price that you would be buying a full third game for at $60, and we're getting way more content than we would have if we got a traditional third game based on the history of these third Pokemon games within a generation. So there is absolutely no way, especially given the 200 Pokemon that are being added for free for even non-expansion pass people, that you could possibly complain about this DLC, honestly. And if you do, like, it's just that good. Like, I really, really try to respect opinions and stuff like that. Obviously, like, everyone has a different opinion. If there's one thing I've learned about being a Pokemon YouTuber, it's that everyone has a different opinion. And if you don't think there is someone with a certain opinion, you're wrong, because they're out there somewhere. But when it comes to this, with how good this expansion pass was, if you are still hating on the game and criticizing it after this, I mean, like I said, it doesn't fix everything that is wrong with Sword and Shield, but straight up, if you're criticizing this expansion, then I can pretty definitively say that you're just about as objectively wrong as anyone could possibly be in this situation, because it's just that good. It really is. And there is nothing about what the expansion is doing or how it is operating or how Game Freak is going forward by offering DLC that is bad in any sense whatsoever. Like it really is. I really would love to try and look at it from a perspective of someone who might be critical of it and say, oh, okay, well, I don't feel this way, but why would someone be critical of this? Why would they criticize it? I want to at least understand like their point of view. But the thing is with this, it's like you can't do it because anyone who's realistically criticizing this is just so far gone in terms of them hating this game that at this point they're just hating it just to hate it. And at that point, your opinion is not respectable anymore because you're kind of just throwing negativity and just critical opinions out there that don't have any basis to them. So overall, I mean, all in all, like I've been saying, it doesn't fix Pokemon Sword and Shield is not a perfect game with this expansion pass. It doesn't fix everything that was criticized about Pokemon Sword and Shield, but it does just about as good as a job as you could possibly do in that regard. And I just think in terms of the expansion pass itself, there's really nothing that you could critically say about it. I mean, we don't have it yet, so I mean, maybe after it comes out, there'll certainly be things we can talk about. Maybe the story is really short, or maybe it just doesn't last long enough before you beat it, or something like that. We don't know, but based on what we've seen, it looks extremely meaty, and they're adding the types of things that we have just been dying for as Pokemon fans. And those types of things are the types of things that, oh no, this wasn't possible before. They couldn't do this. This is kind of against Pokemon's unwritten code. There's no way. But they are literally extending the limits of what is possible in Pokemon, and they're swinging for the fences with kind of the things they're adding. Things like new Regis. Like, are you kidding me? New Regis? That sort of concept just seems like something that would only exist in the world of a fan game or a fan created idea. It doesn't ever seem like Game Freak would do something that just like crazy, but boom, here it is. And with the legendary birds getting Galarian forms, legendary Pokemon getting regional variants, like how does that even work? I thought there was only one legendary of like every single species. Like, how can Galarian forms exist to the, like, that doesn't make any sense. How can there be more legendaries to the point where they're adapting to the environment of another region? It just opens up a whole new can of worms and opens up so many possibilities in terms of what else they could do with Pokemon. There's just like, these types of additions are showing that nothing is off the table when it comes to the future of Pokemon and what they could add. Like, it just, everything is possible at this point as far as I'm concerned based on what we saw in the expansion pass trailer. And that is extremely, extremely exciting as a Pokemon fan, especially if you are basically if you've been following the series the past couple generations, because I would say the past couple generations of Pokemon have been interesting, because while they've been good, every generation of Pokemon has been good, it definitely seems like Game Freak has been trending more towards a casual sort of system. Obviously, this is kind of another big argument or big discussion that's happened within the community, where they have to appeal to the casual gamers and the kids, because obviously Pokemon is very heavily marketed towards them just as much as it is the hardcore players and the older players. So they basically have to include everyone, and because of this, it makes them kind of go a little more light with the type of things they add, for a lack of a better term. And so I feel like a lot of Pokemon fans have kind of gotten used to this idea of just Pokemon playing it safe, so to speak, and just kind of doing things that will be all well and good and will be fun, but really don't kind of swing for the fences, as I said earlier. They're not really going for a home run, they're just trying to get on base. I hate baseball, but that's a really good analogy. So when they do something like this, where this is like literally a home run, they're trying to knock it out of the park. They're trying to get a grand slam and win the World Series with these types of moves. This shows me that Game Freak is starting to crank up the seriousness, because we just barely came off of Pokemon Sword and Shield itself, where they brought back Galarian forms for a second go around. And that was kind of the first thing that showed, like, hey, they're doing something that we really wanted them to do that they normally wouldn't do. They normally would not bring back a feature like this, but they're doing it. All the other stuff in Sword and Shield, like Gigantamax forms and things like that, once again, that's all well and good, but that's kind of within the safe realm. The Galarian forms returning, that's a home run move. The wild area, even if it's just a section, open world Pokemon, that's a home run move. Then we get to the expansion. We've got more Galarian forms. So not only did they do it, but they're committed to it because they continue to add Galarian forms. And these Galarian forms also come in the form of legendary Galarian forms. And we're getting new Regis. And they're adding all of this other stuff that is way past anything they would add in a normal, typical expansion third version like this. Home run moves. And not only is that extremely exciting for the expansion pass specifically, but it is also very exciting for the future of Pokemon. And as we kind of get into our final topic, I guess you could say, of this episode, there's one more thing I want to go over in terms of how this expansion and what it shows off and what it offers ultimately means for the future of Pokemon. There was one key thing that I saw that really tells me that we are in for a special treat within the next couple of years when it comes to Pokemon. And that was the fact that they specifically stated that both areas for the expansions, the Isle of Armor and the Crown Tundra, are going to be wild area maps, meaning they're going to be completely seamless in terms of your travel, so there's not going to be any loading screens or anything of the sort. You're going to be able to control the camera. It's basically going to be an open world experience, and both areas are completely that way 100%. To me, and knowing how Game Freak develops their games, this shows what we are moving towards. Because Game Freak is actually known, because they've actually said it themselves, to whenever they start a new generation of Pokemon on a new system's hardware, they leave themselves room to improve so that with every subsequent game on that system, they are able to improve upon the previous entry and provide a different and new experience for every single game. So every single game on that system, even though it's on the same system, is not the same game. Because Pokemon's the type of game that you could very easily say, oh, well, they're all the same. This is a way they combat that. And that's not to say the first game on the system is going to be bad. It's just they're doing things in a way so that they can make an enjoyable experience here, but then you're not getting tired of it by the time we get to the last game on the system, because they're adding improvements to really get you excited. And this is already showing with the expansion from Sword and Shield, because in Sword and Shield, we got a game that was basically, it was a mix of a traditional Pokemon game in terms of its build, combined with a peppering of the wild area. But now, in Sword and Shield's expansion, it's all wild area, it's all open world. And I know it's only 2 areas, it's only 2 expansions, this is not on the scale of a full game, but that is huge. Make no mistake, the fact that the entirety of Pokemon Sword and Shield expansion is in this open world, just free, seamless format, that is a turning point right there. And it's kind of funny that I talked about, I think it was even last week, how Pokemon need to turn the corner in 2020 and really crank it up. Well, they have done that. And I would suspect, I can't say this for sure, I can't guarantee it, but now that Game Freak has gone from this transition where we've got wild area, but now it's all wild area, it's all open world, it's all seamless, I would suspect that the next step is to take that and make it into a full game, because we had a full game with part of it being the open world. We now are getting like half a game, I would probably say, with all of it being open world. And that's, once again, that's an improvement. That's a step forward. And now the next step is all of a game with all open world. And I think that this expansion pass signifies that that's where we are headed. And that is extremely exciting. That is beyond exciting. I don't know if it's going to happen in, say, Diamond and Pearl remakes, just because those games are remakes of a game that was obviously on the Nintendo DS, that was built with loading screens and not open world in mind and all of that stuff. So just to remain true to the idea of that game, they very well could do it in that more linear fashion where you've got routes and everything. And that's completely understandable if they go that route with that game. So just, it's really hard to say one way or another, but this absolutely going forward in terms of like original games, and maybe it even will affect the Diamond and Pearl remakes as well, is signifying that we are headed to a completely open world Pokemon future as they continue to build upon the things that they established in Sword and Shield, and that is unbelievably exciting. So if what the expansion pass offers doesn't get you excited, I don't know how it couldn't, with legendary birds getting Galarian forms and a dragon Reggie. Are you kidding me? But if that doesn't do it for you as a Pokemon fan, if there's someone out there, if there's a Pokemon fan that exists that doesn't get them excited, then I think the one thing that could trounce that is the idea of a completely open world Pokemon future, and that is exactly what we are heading towards with this game. So, with that being said, I do have a couple more minutes, but that pretty much rounds off my point very concisely and conclusively. So, I think I'm going to kind of just round it off there and finish with some opening or some closing remarks and call it good for today. So, with that being said, I thank you all so very much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. This podcast really supports my personal channel and my personal stuff. So it really means the world that you guys support it, and obviously it helps UCast Studios. We're definitely trying to grow over here as much as we can as well. So we thank you for listening wherever you are listening. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, follow wherever you are, comment if you're on YouTube, let me know your thoughts about all of this, and obviously, we're going to have another episode next week. It's going to be phenomenal. I don't know what it's going to be about because with podcast episodes, I tend to kind of leave all options open until the moment I record because of things like this that can happen literally the day before. We all thought it was just going to be Pokemon Home and Pokemon Sleep, and I don't know if I could have talked about Pokemon Home and Pokemon Sleep for a half hour. So I just left my options open, and then all of a sudden, boom, Pokemon kicks the door down. So it's always a surprise in terms of what's going to be the topic for every episode, and I am definitely looking forward to what we're going to be talking about next week, whatever that may be. So with that being said, I love you guys very much. Hope you will tune in to next week's episode and tune into my content over on my channel if you would like as well. And until then, as always, love you guys once again, and I will smell you guys later.